Okay, so welcome to this Autopilot tutorial. Autopilot for dummies is what I'm calling it. I'm not calling you dumb, but it's a very simple tutorial, so that's why it's called that. So the first thing you need to know about autopilots is they're all pretty much the same. They all work in the same ways. If it's a Boeing, a Cessna, whatever, Airbus works slightly differently because they're made by French people, but generally they all work in really similar ways. So that's the first thing to know. The second thing is to be reassured that they're quite simple. There's not a lot to them really. They're very basic. They're as difficult as you want to make them, and you have to understand that they're designed to be used by pilots, and therefore they're fairly straightforward to use because pilots are quite simple really, and I can say that because I am one. So yeah, we're quite simple creatures. We don't like things that are too complicated. So yeah, they're designed to be used by us. So let's get started. First of all, first thing to know is this thing. This is similar in all planes. In the G1000, it's vertical. In this TBM, it's horizontal. Boeing's and Airbus, the mode control panel's the thing. It's exactly the same place. It's up here. And it's set out kind of in a similar way. So this is a mode control panel, and the next thing you need to know about is this little box on your primary flight display, and it's the same on a Boeing, on an Airbus. There you have this little box at the top, and this is a really important box. This is actually what the aircraft is doing. So the way to remember that I was taught, which I quite like, is this is your Christmas wish list. This is what you're asking Santa for, and this little box, your FMAs, is what Santa's given you for Christmas, or what he actually brought you for Christmas. So I thought that was quite a good way of explaining it. And this little box is called flight mode enunciators, also known as FMAs, and it's a really important box in flight sim, I guess, if you're doing serious flying, but something that we watch a lot in real life. And actually, if there's any change up here during a flight, normally the pilot monitoring will call out whatever he sees here. So that's quite a big important box in real life. So the first thing to know about the MCP panel is that it's split up into sections. So this is your kind of horizontal section. So you've got heading, approach, nav. We'll go through these later. Flight director, bank. This is your middle one. This is your altitude. So this is all your vertical selections, and this is a course button, which is for nav stuff, which we don't really need to worry about for autopilots. But first of all, the first thing you need to do before you engage in autopilot is you need to have a flight director on. So flight director is FD. On Boeing's, it's a little switch on the sides. On Airbus, can't remember if it's a switch or if it's a button, but it'll say FD for flight director. So now that we've got our flight director on, the autopilot's still actually not doing anything. You can see I can roll the aircraft and it won't do anything. And all this is doing is basically giving us really simple modes of what we had whenever we selected the flight director on. So if we want the autopilot to actually fly those modes, we have to engage it. So to engage the autopilot, you click the AP button, and the AP button's quite straightforward. It always says AP. Sometimes on Boeing's it says CMD for command, and you just press that button. Press that button. Now I can take my hands off. The plane will fly what it was told to fly whenever I engage that flight director button. So we can see now we have a warning message, master caution, so we'll cancel that warning and we'll have a look at what it is. It says autopilot on, yaw damper off, right? So in this plane, whenever the autopilot is engaged, it wants the yaw damper on. What's a yaw damper? Well, it's a thing to stop oscillations created in GA aircraft. It's normally fishtail and stuff like that. And bigger aircraft, it's something called Dutch roll. If you want to learn more about that, I suggest you Google it. It's not very exciting. It's something you would kind of learn about during your ATPL exams. So yeah, if you want to do that, then feel free. So we'll put the yaw damper on anyway, just get rid of that message. And that's that. So you can see we've got roll, we've got the autopilot on, we've got yaw damper on, and we've got pitch. So that's really basic modes. It's not actually doing anything other than flying the selections we had whenever we clicked the flight director button. So we're going to try and make this as quick as possible. So then we're going to start with the roll modes. So heading, HDG, and all this does is basically fly what we call the heading bug. So this is the heading bug here. this little blue thing, and you can see I can spin it around as I move this little dial. And if I want to, so that's a heading pre-select now. So if I want the aircraft to fly that heading, all I do is click this button, HDG. So we're going to click that button and we're going to look at our FMA and make sure that we've asked Santa for it, and we're going to make sure he brought us it. So let's press HDG, and you can see straight away FMA heading. So it's now going to turn on that heading. So you can see we've got a heading mode on now, and we've still got our basic pitch mode, and this is the same on all aircraft. It's really simple like this. They all work in the same way. So if you want now to, that's a really basic horizontal mode. We also have nav modes, which we'll talk about LNAV and VNAV towards the end of the video because it's a bit more complex. So now let's look at our pitch modes and our altitude modes. So the important thing to know first of all is that normally your autopilot and your auto throttle will speak to each other, and your autopilot will say, hey auto throttle, I need full power, it'll give full power, or hey auto throttle, I need idle power, it'll give it idle power, or auto throttle, I need you to maintain this speed, it'll maintain that speed, yada yada. On this plane I've got no auto throttle engaged, so I'm going to use manual throttle, although I do believe it might actually have auto throttle, but we're not going to use it now. So first things first, what do we do? So here's your altitude selection panel, your pitch panel, and what we're going to do is we're going to select an altitude. So you can see with this little wheel, we want to select an altitude. So let's select 5,000 feet. The 5,000 feet selected here, but we haven't actually told the autopilot how we want to get there, so you're not going to get anything. So now you have to ask the autopilot for Christmas. Now you've got to ask Santa for Christmas to get up to 5,000 feet. So how are you going to do it? We're going to use the most simple form, and we're going to use what they call flight level change. So FLC, flight level change. In Boeing's it's called flitch. In some videos I've heard it called flick and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff, but flitch is what you want to call it if you want to be normal. So how does it work? Well, if you click that button, the computer will assign a speed, and it will assign your current speed if that's what you're at, and it will say, okay, auto throttle, I want you to climb up to 5,000 feet at this speed. So the auto throttle will go, okay, I'll give you full power. So it'll throw on full power in a climb, and it'll maintain this speed to get up to 5,000 feet. So that's it. So flitch goes on, says flitch 222 knots, which is the current speed, and you can see it pitching up. I've left the power where it is, so you can see the speed's coming back. So what's the aircraft going to do? It's going to pitch down, and it's going to re-get that speed, and then it's going to pitch back up again, and it's going to keep doing that because it doesn't have any excess thrust. So let's give it some. So that's what an auto throttle would have done in a normal airliner. So there we go. We're climbing up now. We've got excess thrust, and you can see it's already gone to alt. And this seems to be a flight sim fault more than anything. Where it seems to go into what we call altitude acquire a little bit too early. So let's see what it does, but you can see that the speeds are on the way now because it's come out of flitch. So if it had been still in flitch like it would in real life, it would have been still pitching up a lot more, and the speed would have still been back. So now we're having to take excess power off in order to climb that 5,000 feet. But anyway, that's flitch. It's very basic. I can show you an example of a descent. So it would level out at 5,000 feet. Let's let it do that. Right, so there you go, more or less leveled out at 5,000 feet. And now you'd have to reset your power to maintain the speed that you want. So let's say we want to descend to 4,500 feet. We hit flitch. Computer says, okay, you want to descend at this speed, and you want to go down to 4,500 feet. So it's going to try and do that. It's flitch 238 knots. And so normally it would talk to auto throttle, and it would say, hey auto throttle, give me idle thrust. So auto throttle goes idle thrust. Annoying woman speaks. Aircraft pitches down. It's going to maintain that speed if it was a longer descent, but it's already gone to altitude acquire, and it's going to level off at 4,500 feet. So really, really simple. You can also, I will show you So if you want to descend really quickly, and this is kind of fun, we do this in airliners. If we want to descend really quickly, we want to get altitude off quickly, we want to trade our height for kinetic energy, so we want to increase our speed. So if we're slow in an airliner like we are now, we need to get down quickly. What we'll do is we'll hit flitch and we'll crank the speed up and pull the power back, and you'll see, I'll bring the altitude back, you'll see what kind of crazy feet per minute it'll do, because the aircraft knows that you want to fly at this speed. I've got it set at 311 at a minute, which wouldn't be very real, but it's pointing the nose at the ground to increase that speed until it gets to 311, and then it's going to keep it. So yeah, that's, and likewise if you wanted to climb, so let's say right, we're done with that. Let's say we want to climb to 5,000 feet. Oops. Let's say we want to climb to 5,000 feet and we want to climb really, really quickly. What we can do is we can click flitch and it's gone to 222 knots, which is our present speed, and let's decrease our speed to 122 knots. So what it's going to do now is going to pitch up until the speed comes way back to 122 knots. And you can see it's climbing like a homesick angel because it's bleeding off that excess speed that it has. Instead of like doing something stupid and wasting the energy, it uses the energy to get up to that altitude. So that's flight level change. Probably the most used button outside of VNAV on airliners, and we'll talk about that later. But VNAV isn't really working in flight sim. The autopilots in general aren't really working in flight sim, as you can see, doing something weird. Wouldn't do that in real life. So that is flight level change, and the next button we're going to look at is this alt button. So this is altitude hold. So if we click this, the autopilot will maintain the altitude that we clicked it at. So we clicked it at 4,500 feet. So now it's going to go back down to 4,500 feet. And we would adjust our throttle, or the auto throttle would adjust our throttle to maintain the speed that we had select, but we'll not worry about that today. So that's altitude button, fairly simple. The next important one is VS, vertical speed. So VS isn't really used that much in real life, and the reason we don't use it on airliners is that it has no speed protection. So if we're using flight level change and we've got a speed selected to climb at, the computer will automatically hold that speed, so we know that we're speed protected. Although we monitor it all the time, but we know that it's speed protected. The problem with flight level change is that it has kind of no speed protection. So basically what happens is, right, we'll say we want to climb to 7,000 feet. Let's set 7,000 feet in our window. Let's ask Santa for it, right? And I'll demonstrate this. So if we click the vertical speed button, it comes up vertical speed 0 feet per minute. So now we want to go up, say we want to climb up at 500 feet, or well, let's say 500 feet per minute. So now the aircraft's going to climb up 500 feet per minute, which will do quite nicely. The problem with this is if we don't add any extra power, you'll see that the speed will deteriorate. So the speed is already coming back. You can see that it's trickling back. If I put on a higher vertical speed and don't add any extra thrust, the speed's just going to come back. And what can happen is the speed will come back and back and back and back and back until you end up in a stall situation, because the aircraft's just, all it's doing is maintaining the climb rate. So if your climb rate is too fast for your thrust setting to maintain your speed, or you don't have enough excess thrust to maintain the speed, the aircraft will bleed airspeed, and that's one of the problems with it. Likewise, if you're in a descent, so let's put it to 3,000 feet, and we click vertical speed, and we go down at vertical speed 1,000 feet per minute, or 1,200 feet per minute, and we don't keep control of our power settings, the speed will increase and increase and increase until we end up in an overspeed situation, if it's got far enough to descend. So it's something to be wary of. Vertical speed has no speed protection. That's all I want to say about that. Another thing to be careful of is that whenever you select vertical speed, so say I go Alt, right, and I'm going to click vertical speed, now it goes, a lot of the aircraft like Boeing's will go to, whenever you click the vertical speed button, it will automatically assign your current vertical speed. If you're, I think in this aircraft it's maintained the last pre-assigned vertical speed, but in Boeing's, if you click VS, it will put your current vertical speed. So something to be aware of if you're trying to do something or fly an approach or something like that. Yeah, so that's that. Next we're going to talk about is so let's climb up to 5,000 feet where we're doing that, and we'll use flitch because we've already learned that we like that. We've got flitch 2 to 10 knots, and it's already out card. I think it's 219 knots. So next we're going to talk about the smarter modes, and the smarter modes in real life are what we use 90% of the time. So the two modes that I'm talking about are nav, or in Boeing's it's known as LNAV. I think it might be LNAV in Airbus as well, not quite sure. And so that's our horizontal profile, and this is our vertical profile, so VNAV. So LNAV and VNAV are the two most used modes in airliners, and the way they work is they work off our flight management computer. So whatever we have programmed our computer with, the route and the altitude restrictions, all that good stuff, that's what the VNAV will try and fly. I say try and fly because it's a bit more complicated than just flying it, because it still relies on the pilot to make altitude selections and things like that. But yeah, we'll get into that whenever the flight sim aircraft are actually good enough to fly it. At the minute, the default aircraft in flight sim are unusable in LNAV and VNAV. Approach mode is used on ILS approaches, and it's used to basically lock on to the glide slope and localizer, and the computer will lock on those if that's selected, and it'll fly down those beams and it will bring you down to the runway. And if you want to see that, you can actually watch the ILS tutorial video, and I'll put a link up to it now, and that'll teach you how to do an ILS in 6 minutes, and you can see the approach button being used there. So yeah, that's Autopilot for Dummies. Basically just go on, fly routes, try the few buttons that I've talked about, and you'll find how you like to use them, and you'll find the kind of pitfalls yourself. Hopefully you don't find them out by crashing, but yeah, you should be aware of some of the problems with things like vertical speed and stuff like that for now. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, give a wee thumbs up. If you want to leave a comment, please do. If you have a question, leave it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it for you. Likewise, if there's anything else you want to see, put them in the comments and I'll make it in an upcoming video. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Fun talking to you again. See you next time.